Sit closer to the hearth, my child. Let the firelight dance in your eyes as the embers settle into a deep, glowing red. The world outside is cold and vast, much like the high plateaus of the east, but here we are safe within the scent of old parchment and cedarwood. Tonight I will tell you a story not of kings born to golden cradles, but of a man who emerged from the shadows of history to reshape the world with the quiet precision of a master weaver. His name was Abu Muslim al-Khurasani. Imagine, if you will, the city of Merv in the year 747. It was a jewel of the Silk Road, a place where the dust of 1,000 camel caravans settled upon the white walls of the Umayyad governors. But the air in Khorasan was different then. It was heavy, like the stillness before a summer storm. It was a land of deep valleys and sharp peaks, where the wind carried the scent of wild thyme and the distant, cold promise of the mountains. Our story begins in the hour before the sun dares to touch the horizon, the blue hour, when the world is held in a silver suspension. Abu Muslim sat alone in a small, modest room. He was a man of medium height, lean as a desert wolf, with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of a century's observation. He did not move with the haste of the young. Every gesture was measured, every breath a conscious act of discipline. Before him lay a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper and a small well of dark ink. The room smelled of dry earth and the faint, metallic tang of the ink. This was his ritual. Before the politics of the day, before the secret meetings with the messengers who traveled the hidden paths of the empire, there was the silence. He cherished this silence. It was the foundation upon which he built his resolve. He dipped a reed pen into the ink. He did not write a decree or a call to arms. Instead, he traced the lines of ancient poetry, reflecting on the transience of power. He knew, better than most, that the great empires of the world were like the seasons. They bloomed in the warmth of justice and withered in the frost of neglect. He looked at his hands, stained slightly by the work of the previous day. They were the hands of a man who understood the earth, who knew that to change a landscape, one must first understand the grain of the soil. As the first sliver of grey light filtered through the high, narrow window, Abu Muslim rose. His movements were fluid, hushed by the soft leather of his boots against the stone floor. He prepared his morning meal with the same focus he applied to the maps of the provinces. A piece of dry barley bread, a few wrinkled dates from the southern groves, and a cup of clear, cold water drawn from the well in the courtyard. He ate slowly, savoring the rough texture of the grain. He thought of the farmers in the fields of Khorasan, the men whose backs were bent under the weight of taxes they could no longer pay. He thought of the scholars in the libraries of Isfahan, whose wisdom was being stifled by the pride of distant rulers in Damascus. Abu Muslim was a bridge between these worlds, the high and the low, the scholar and the soldier. He walked out into the courtyard. The air was crisp, biting at his skin, a reminder that life in the East was earned, not given. He watched a spider spinning its web between two pomegranate branches. It was a marvel of engineering, fragile yet resilient, invisible until the dew caught the light. He saw himself in that web. He was weaving a network of loyalties, a tapestry of shared grievances and quiet hopes that stretched from the Oxus River to the heart of Mesopotamia. In those early years, he was a shadow. He was known to the inner circles of the Abbasid family as their most trusted agent, the one who could speak to the soul of Khorasan. But to the world at large, he was merely a traveler, a man of quiet dignity who listened more than he spoke. He knew that the greatest changes do not begin with a shout, but with a whisper that finds a home in 1,000 hearts. He sat on a stone bench, watching the sky turn from charcoal to a soft, bruised purple. He reflected on the nature of leadership. To lead, he believed, was not to command, but to serve as the vessel for a people's collective will. He had spent years studying the histories of the Persians and the Arabs, finding the common threads of human dignity that bound them. He saw the inequalities of the current age, the way the old nobility looked down upon the new converts, the way wealth pooled in the hands of the few while the many went hungry. His wisdom was not found in grand speeches, but in the way he treated the man who brought him his horse, or the way he listened to the grievances of a village elder. He possessed a rare quality, the ability to make every man feel as though his words were the only ones that mattered. As the sun finally broke over the horizon, painting the tops of the minarets in gold, Abu Muslim felt a sense of profound peace. He knew that the path ahead was fraught with peril. He knew that to challenge the might of the Umayyad Caliphate was to invite the whirlwind. But as he felt the warmth of the sun on his face, he also felt the rightness of his cause. He returned to his room and picked up a piece of black silk. It was a simple cloth, devoid of ornament. This was to be his symbol, the black standard. In the coming months, it would become a beacon for all those who sought a new dawn. But for now, it was just a piece of fabric, soft beneath his calloused fingers. He folded it with care, tucking it away like a seed planted in the dark earth, waiting for the right moment to break through the surface. The city of Merv was waking up. He could hear the distant cry of the street vendors, the clatter of hooves on the cobblestones, the rhythmic thud of the weavers' looms. The day had begun. Abu Muslim stepped out into the light, his face a mask of calm, his heart a steady flame. Close your eyes now, child. Feel the stillness of that Khorasani morning. The world is vast, and the stories of the past are like the stars, steady, distant, and full of light to guide us through the dark. Sleep now, and tomorrow I will tell you how the shadow began to move, and how the black banners first unfurled against the wind. Chapter 2, A Weaver of Words and Alliances. Let me tell you now of the years when the young man learned to speak not with one voice, but with many. In the dusty streets of Merv, where the Abbasid movement made its hidden home, Abu Muslim walked among people who spoke a dozen different tongues. The morning air carried the sound of Persian from one doorway, Arabic from another, and the ancient Sogdian language from the merchants who came down from the north. He would pause sometimes, in the cool hours after dawn, listening to the rhythm of these voices as a musician listens to different instruments. He understood something then that many men never learn in a lifetime. Words were not merely sounds that carried meaning. They were keys that opened doors to human hearts. Picture him there, perhaps 23 or 24 years old, sitting in a small room above a carpet merchant's shop. The morning light slanted through a narrow window, illuminating the dust that danced in the air. Before him lay letters written in different scripts, the flowing Arabic of the religious scholars, the angular Persian of the old noble families, the practical Sogdian of the trading caravans. He would spend hours with these letters, not merely reading them, but feeling the weight of each word, understanding what lay beneath the surface. The Abbasid leaders had noticed his gift. Ibrahim al-Imam, who led the movement from his distant exile, had sent word that this young man possessed something rare, the ability to speak to farmers in their own rough dialect at sunrise, and to address learned men in elegant phrases by evening. But it was more than mere linguistic skill. Abu Muslim seemed to understand what each person needed to hear, what words would settle their fears or kindle their hopes. Let me tell you of a particular day that shaped him. It was summer, and the heat lay heavy on the city like a woolen blanket. Abu Muslim had been sent to meet with a group of village elders from the countryside, men whose families had worked the same land for generations. They were suspicious of city folk, wary of promises made by movements and causes. He met them not in a grand hall, but in the shade of a mulberry tree outside the city walls. He wore simple clothes, and he brought bread and dates to share. For a long time they sat in silence, as was the custom. Abu Muslim did not rush to fill the quiet with words. He had learned that silence, too, was a language. When he finally spoke, he asked them about their harvest, about the condition of the irrigation channels, about the small, daily struggles that filled their lives. He listened as an old man described how the tax collectors had taken too much grain the previous autumn. He watched as another elder's weathered hands traced patterns in the dust, showing where the water no longer reached the fields as it once had. Only then did Abu Muslim speak of change. But he did not speak of grand revolutions or distant promises. He spoke of justice as a farmer speaks of good soil, as something practical, something that could be touched and measured. Fair taxation. Water rights protected. Local disputes settled by local wisdom rather than distant governors who had never walked these fields. The elders listened. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, they began to nod. This was his gift, you see. Abu Muslim understood that allegiances were not built with fiery speeches alone, but with patience, with genuine attention, with the careful weaving of trust thread by thread. In the evenings, he would return to his small room and write reports to Ibrahim al-Imam. By candlelight, he would describe not just who had pledged support, but why. He wrote of the grievances that lay in people's hearts, of the specific injustices that made them willing to risk everything for change. These letters were thoughtful, detailed, and remarkably perceptive for a man so young. Sometimes, late at night, he would set down his pen and simply sit in the darkness, listening to the city settling into sleep. The distant bark of a dog, the whisper of wind through the narrow streets, the soft footsteps of the night watchman making his rounds. In these quiet moments, he would think about the weight of what he was building. Each alliance, each promise, each carefully chosen word was like a stone placed in the foundation of something vast. He felt the responsibility of it, the way a mason feels the weight of each stone, knowing that lives would depend on the strength of what he built. The movement was growing, spreading through Khorasan like roots beneath the earth, invisible but strong. And Abu Muslim was learning to be its voice, not loud, not harsh, but clear and steady as a bell in the mountain air. Sleep now, and tomorrow I will tell you of the greater tests that lay ahead. Let me tell you about the quiet moments in the life of Abu Muslim al-Khurasani, a man whose name echoes through the annals of history, yet whose intimate, daily life remains a tapestry woven with threads of contemplation and wisdom. We find ourselves now in the third chapter of his story, a moment of silent reflection beneath ancient pomegranate trees. Imagine the scene. The sun has just begun its descent, painting the sky with hues of gold and rose. The air is filled with the sweet, faintly tart scent of pomegranate blossoms, their delicate petals drifting lazily to the ground. Abu Muslim stands amidst these trees, their gnarled branches heavy with fruit, their leaves rustling softly in the evening breeze. This is a place he often retreats to, a sanctuary of solitude where the weight of the world can be momentarily set aside. His morning routines are simple, yet profound. He rises with the sun, the first light of dawn creeping across the earth like a gentle lover. The coolness of the morning air clings to his skin as he performs his ablutions, the water from the clay jug both refreshing and grounding. The sounds of the waking world are a symphony to his ears, the distant call of a rooster, the soft murmur of prayers from neighboring houses, the occasional rustle of a mouse in the underbrush. These are the sounds that anchor him, that remind him of the simplicity of life amidst the complexities of his mission. Breakfast is a quiet affair. He sits beneath the shade of a pomegranate tree, a loaf of warm bread and a bowl of honeyed yogurt before him. The bread is freshly baked, its crust crisp and golden, the interior soft and yielding. The yogurt is thick and creamy, the honey a golden ribbon that dances in the light. He eats slowly, savoring each bite, his mind wandering through the events of the day ahead. The taste of the honey lingers on his tongue, a sweetness that mirrors the quiet joy he finds in these moments of solitude. As the day wears on, Abu Muslim often finds himself in deep contemplation. He walks among the pomegranate trees, their ancient trunks a testament to the passage of time. The bark is rough beneath his fingertips, a tactile reminder of the resilience of nature. He ponders the lessons of the past, the challenges of the present, and the uncertainties of the future. His thoughts are a whirlwind of strategy and philosophy, yet in this place they find a sense of calm and clarity. One evening, as the sun dips below the horizon, he sits beneath his favorite pomegranate tree, its branches heavy with fruit. The sky is a canvas of deep blues and purples, the first stars beginning to twinkle like distant jewels. He picks up a pomegranate, its weight substantial in his hand. The skin is tough and leathery, a deep red that shimmers in the fading light. He runs his thumb over the surface, feeling the tiny bumps that hint at the treasures within. He splits the pomegranate open, the juices running down his fingers, staining them a deep crimson. The seeds are a vibrant red, glistening like rubies. He pops one into his mouth, the burst of flavor, a tangy explosion on his tongue. The juice is sweet and tart, a complex dance of tastes that mirrors the complexities of life. He eats the pomegranate slowly, savoring each seed, each burst of flavor, each moment of reflection. As the night deepens, the sounds of the world around him fade away. The rustling of the leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft whisper of the wind, they all blend into a symphony of tranquility. He leans back against the trunk of the tree, the rough bark pressing into his skin. The night is cool, the air filled with the scent of earth and blossoms. He closes his eyes, listening to the quiet rhythm of his own breath, the steady beat of his heart. In these moments, Abu Muslim finds a sense of peace that is often elusive in the chaos of his daily life. He reflects on the wisdom of the past, the lessons of history, the resilience of the human spirit. He thinks of the pomegranate tree, its roots deeply embedded in the earth, its branches reaching towards the sky. It is a metaphor for his own journey, a reminder of the strength and resilience that lie within him. He opens his eyes, gazing up at the stars. They are a tapestry of light, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the smallness of his own existence. Yet in this smallness, he finds a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. He is but one thread in the grand tapestry of life, yet his actions, his choices, his reflections, all have the power to shape the world around him. As the night deepens, Abu Muslim rises, his body aching from the long day. He dusts off his clothes, the scent of pomegranate clinging to his fingers. He takes one last look at the ancient tree, its branches heavy with fruit, its leaves rustling softly in the night breeze. He knows that tomorrow will bring new challenges, new decisions, new reflections. But for now, he is content to bask in the quiet tranquility of this moment, to savor the sweetness of the pomegranate, to listen to the whispers of the night. And so, with a heart filled with wisdom and a mind at peace, Abu Muslim al-Khurasani retreats to his quarters, the echoes of the day's reflections lingering in his mind. The night envelops him, a soft blanket of tranquility, as he prepares to face the dawn and the challenges it will bring. For in the quiet moments, in the simple pleasures, in the contemplative solitude, he finds the strength to navigate the complexities of life. Let me tell you about an evening in the life of a man who carried more than a flag upon a staff. He carried the work of a province, the trust of soldiers, and the uneasy silence that follows victory. The man was Abu Muslim al-Khurasani, and this chapter of his life unfolded in the wide, sunburnt sweep of Khorasan, in the months and years after the uprising that brought him to a place of power. Sit close and listen to the small, true things. In the mornings, chroniclers tell us, he rose early, while the air was still cool and the city slow to stir. Merv and the towns of Khorasan were places of water and dust together, canals and gardens pressing against the edge of steppe, and the first sounds were simple: water drawn into basins, the far creak of a mill, the whispering of a small household waking. He kept watch over those domestic sounds, as a man watches a map that is itself alive. His attention was in the small arrangements as much as in the great ones. Presentations were made to him, petitions folded and offered. He listened, and where he judged there was injustice, he made a judgment. The sources that recount his years as governor emphasize this aspect: the exercise of authority day by day in the quiet work of administration. There is a texture to such mornings that I want you to feel: the scratch of reed mats underfoot, the faint tang of smoke from a brazier, the weight of a draught of simple bread, and a small cup of something warm to break the night's fast. Those who wrote of Abu Muslim noted an economy to his household, an avoidance of excessive display. He did not seek the lures of sumptuous banquets. His table, we are told, was plain. That was not merely thrift. It was a habit of government formed from years on the road, the discipline of a commander who learns that order often comes from small, steady choices rather than spectacular gestures. His mornings passed into work in a manner that was deliberate and unhurried. Secretaries brought reports inked upon paper, names and numbers, lists of levies, and the slow business of settling disputes. He read. He questioned. He sent couriers on their way. To rule Khorasan was to attend to the tiny hinges upon which large doors turned, the payment of soldiers, the surveying of routes, the arrangement of garrison posts, the repair of a qanat that kept a quarter of a town alive. These details do not make good legends. They make good government, and it is in the plain record of such things that his authority was exercised. When afternoon heat pressed down like a hand, he would walk among those he commanded, not always with ostentation, but with presence. There are accounts of him inspecting garrisons and rallying men who had followed him out of deserts and across provinces. The soldiers who bore his banner knew his face. The sound of boots upon packed earth, the jingle of gear, the low murmur of a camp, these were the rhythms of his days. Sometimes he sat with officers and listened to their reports. Sometimes he walked alone at the edge of the gardens where the green gave way to dust, feeling the breeze and listening to the small complaints of the leaves. This was the private work of power, slow and continual, a string of tasks that did not admit a single, decisive hour, but rather demanded steadiness. Evenings were quieter and more reflective. The city would cool, lamps were lit, the clink of pottery became the evening's percussion. Abu Muslim was remembered as a man not given to loud boasts. He preferred conversation, which he kept pointed and brief, or silence, which he filled with attention. In those hours, he read the dispatches that arrived from distant posts, or enjoyed the company of a trusted few who had stood by him in the hard years of campaigning. The food was modest. The talk was not about glory, but about repair, about the houses that needed mending, about the names of men who had fallen or who required pensions. It was ordinary mercy and the ordinary justice of a governor's care. There was a habit, too, of night watching. He would sometimes stand beneath a sky so sharp with stars that it seemed to cut the air, and he would watch the flag, his banner, as it moved in the evening breeze. It is easy to write the image as drama, but the chroniclers present it as a quiet thing. A man thinking over the work of the day, the decisions taken, the letters sent, the promises made and kept. Power, they suggest, is a slow wait. It is not only in the triumphs that a leader is tested, but in the small, sleepless reckonings when one thinks of obligations yet unmet and of men waiting for relief. He was not free, even in his measured solitude, from doubt. Those who recorded his life indicate that he was acutely aware of the fragile balance between local authority and distant command. The loyalty he commanded in Khorasan had roots in deserts and in the loyalty of tribes and soldiers. The center in the west held its own interests. That awareness shaped his decisions. It shaped the way he received envoys, the way he wrote to the capital, and the way he chose his confidants. A leader's wisdom is often not a thing of confident pronouncements, but a prudence that keeps one's hand near the plough. He learned, over years, the small crafts of keeping trust and keeping counsel. There were also small comforts. The smell of wet earth after irrigation, the whisper of a page turned, the quiet laughter of a companion over a remembered joke, these things steadied him. He knew the value of routine, of rising, of meeting, of returning at the day's end to a simple meal and a modest place to sleep. The chroniclers speak of a man who, in the midst of vast responsibility, kept hold of modest habits that kept him human. As night deepened and the lamps burned low, he would sometimes linger by a window or a doorway, feeling the coolness that came creeping across the city, smelling the mingled scents of cooking and dust, and hearing the far, soft noises of a place that slept in shifts. In those late, small hours he thought of the cost of decisions, not as abstractions, but as names and faces, and he kept his thoughts close, trusting a few and testing many. In that way he governed, not by thunder, but by the slow, careful economy of human trust. So the days in Khorasan flowed, a river of small actions and modest mercies, and the banner that moved in the evening breeze settled into the rhythm of the town's life. The weight upon him was real, and it was borne in silence and in the ordinary labours that a governor performs. Tomorrow the petitions would come again, the canals would be tended, the lists of soldiers would be examined, and he would rise once more before the light. For now night wrapped the city, and the man who had led a people through change rested, listening to the soft, certain sounds of a place that needed him to be steady. Let me tell you about a man by a river in a quiet hour before dawn. Abu Muslim al-Khurasani was not often still. His life was a movement, across deserts, through cities, at the head of an army that churned the dust of Khorasan into a black banner on the horizon. But here, on the banks of the Oxus River, in that deep blue silence that comes just before the world remembers itself, he was simply a man sitting on a worn rug, listening to water. He had come to Merv, that ancient city of scholars and soldiers, not for conquest this time, but for conversation. The great administrative machine of the movement he served was being assembled here, its gears and levers forged from law and ledger rather than sword and spear. His days were filled with the dry rustle of parchment, the murmur of secretaries, the precise arguments of tax collectors and judges. He would sit for hours in a sunlit room, the scent of ink and old paper thick in the air, weighing the merits of one irrigation canal proposal against another, or deciding which local elder possessed the honesty to oversee a granary. His hand, which knew the grip of a scimitar, now grew familiar with the weight of a reed pen. But it was in these pre-dawn moments, by the river they called the Jehan, that he found his balance. The river was wide here, a great, slow-moving serpent of silver in the moonlight. Fishermen's boats were dark shapes against the current, their lanterns like low, drifting stars. He would wrap a simple woolen cloak around his shoulders against the chill, feel the coarse weave against his neck, and watch his breath cloud in the air. A companion, a trusted captain from the old days, often joined him. They spoke little at first, sharing only the companionship of silence and the rhythmic lap of water against the reeds. One morning, as the first hint of peach-colored light brushed the eastern dunes, the captain gestured to the sprawling military camp visible across the river, its 1,000 cookfires beginning to spark like earthbound constellations. From a single village to this, the captain said, his voice a soft rumble. It is a story they will tell for 1,000 years. Abu Muslim watched the water, his face calm in the dim light. They will tell the story of the banner, and the battles, and the numbers, he replied. His words came slowly, measured like the river's flow. They will speak of the day the black cloth was raised. But they will not speak of this quiet. They will not tell of the weight of a pen, or the sound of a river at night, or the doubt that comes when you choose a canal's path, knowing it will decide whether a child eats next winter. He picked up a smooth, water-worn stone from the bank, its surface cool and perfect in his palm. The battle is simple. You see your enemy. Your heart beats, your arm swings. But this, he nodded back toward the sleeping city. This is a different kind of war. a war against hunger, against injustice, against the quiet decay that rots an empire from within. It is fought with grain and justice and well-drawn borders. It is endless, and it is far more wearying. The captain was quiet, listening to the wisdom born not from triumph, but from responsibility. When we began, Abu Muslim continued, placing the stone back carefully, as if returning a sacred object, we were a single voice shouting in a canyon. Now we are the echo that fills it. And an echo must be careful of its sound. He spoke not of glory, but of consequence. Every appointment he made, every decree he signed, sent ripples through the lives of thousands. The farmer in his field, the potter in his shop, the mother in her home. This immense, invisible web of cause and effect was his true battlefield now. As the sky lightened to a soft grey, the details of the world returned. The mud-brick walls of Merv, the green of the riverside fields, the distant call of a waking donkey. The moment of profound stillness was passing, giving way to the day's demands. Abu Muslim rose, his joints stiff from the cool ground. He folded his rug with a practiced, unhurried motion. The contemplative man by the river was receding, and the governor was stepping forward. Yet the wisdom from the riverbank would remain. It was in the deliberate pace of his walk back to the city, in the attentive way he would later listen to a humble petition, in the patience he would show a confused clerk. He had learned that true power was not just in the thunderous charge that topples walls, but in the quiet competence that builds a world in its place. It was a lesson written not in the annals of war, but in the pre-dawn whispers of a river under a fading carpet of stars. And with that lesson held close, he turned from the water and walked toward the waking city, ready to build. Come closer now, and let the firelight dance in your eyes one last time tonight. The embers are a deep, pulsing orange, much like the sun as it sets over the plains of Iraq. We have traveled far together, through the high mountains of Khorasan and the bustling markets of Merv. We have seen a young man rise from the shadows to become the architect of an empire. But tonight, in this final chapter, we find Abu Muslim not at the head of an army, but in the quiet, measured pace of a man seeking the end of his own long road. It was the year 755. The great dust of the revolution had settled, and the world was beginning to turn on a new axis. Abu Muslim, the man whose name had been whispered in every corner of the East, found himself in a peculiar kind of silence. Imagine him now, in the early morning light of his camp. He is no longer wearing the heavy iron mail of a general. Instead, he wears a simple robe of fine, unbleached wool. He sits on a small, woven rug outside his tent. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and the faint, sweet aroma of dried dates. He watches a small beetle laboring across a stone, and in his wisdom, he does not move to help it or hinder it. He simply observes. This is the peace he has earned, the ability to look at the smallest life and see the same complexity he once saw in the movement of nations. He was traveling toward the great desert, ostensibly on a journey of personal reflection, a pilgrimage of the spirit. But the air was heavy with the weight of politics. The new caliph, al-Mansur, sat upon the throne that Abu Muslim's own hands had helped build. And as is often the way with those who hold great power, the caliph looked upon the man who had given it to him with a mixture of gratitude and growing fear. Abu Muslim knew this. He felt it in the way the messengers arrived, their horses lathered in sweat, their eyes darting, their voices thin with unspoken tension. Yet he remained calm. Let us look at his morning routine during these final days. He would rise before the sun, washing his face in water that was still icy from the night chill. He enjoyed the sting of it. It reminded him that he was alive, that his skin was still sensitive to the world. He would eat a simple breakfast, bread baked over coals, dipped in a bit of oil and salt. He chewed slowly, savoring the grain, thinking of the farmers in the fields of the Oxus River who had labored to grow it. He understood now, more than ever, that the strength of a leader is not found in the sharpness of his sword, but in the bread of his people. One afternoon, as the caravan halted near the ruins of an ancient city, Abu Muslim walked alone among the crumbling brick walls. The wind whistled through the gaps where windows once stood. He ran his hand over the rough, sun-warmed stone. He thought of the kings who had lived there, men who thought their names would last forever. He smiled to himself, a slow, knowing smile. He realized that he, too, was a part of this grand, shifting sand. His work was done. He had shifted the course of the world, and now the world would continue without him. There is a profound wisdom in knowing when your part in the story is reaching its conclusion. He did not feel bitterness. Instead, he felt a lightness, as if he were slowly unburdening himself of a heavy cloak he had worn for 20 years. The summons eventually came. He was invited to the court of al-Mansur in Mesopotamia. His advisors, men who had bled for him, whispered warnings. "Do not go," they said. "The lion's den is no place for the one who helped the lion to his throne." Abu Muslim listened to them with a gentle patience. He watched the way the smoke from their campfire curled toward the stars. He told them, in a voice as steady as the flow of a deep river, that a man cannot run from the destiny he has woven with his own hands. To flee would be to admit fear, and he had long ago traded fear for understanding. The journey toward the palace was slow. He insisted on stopping to speak with the locals, to listen to the grievances of the village elders, and to watch the children play in the dust. He was collecting memories, perhaps, or perhaps he was simply making sure that the peace he had fought for was taking root in the soil. On his final night, before reaching the court, he sat in his tent and wrote. not orders for an army, but reflections on the nature of shadow and light. He wrote of how a man's legacy is not written in stone, but in the hearts of those who find justice because of his actions. He smelled the ink, a sharp, metallic scent, and felt the scratch of the reed pen on the parchment. It was a tactile, grounding moment. When he finally entered the presence of the Caliph, he did not go as a servant, nor as a rival. He went as a man who had completed his task. The halls of the palace were vast, the marble floors echoing with the sound of his footsteps. The air was thick with the smell of incense and the hushed whispers of courtiers. We know from the scrolls of history that this meeting would be his last. But imagine him in that moment, standing tall, his eyes clear, his heart quiet. He looked upon the young ruler and saw the cycle of power beginning anew. He felt no need to struggle. He had found an inner peace that no crown could provide and no sword could take away. As the shadows lengthened in that great hall, Abu Muslim al-Khurasani stepped out of the bright light of history and into the soft, eternal silence of the past. He left behind a world transformed, a name that would be studied for 1,000 years, and a lesson in the quiet dignity of a life fully lived. And so, my dear ones, the fire has burned down to the softest glow. The story of the man from Khorasan is complete. He rests now, as the earth rests under the blanket of the night. Let his journey remind you that even in a world of great change, the truest victory is the stillness we find within ourselves. Sleep now. The desert wind is quiet. The mountains are still. The story is told. Sleep, and find your own peace in the silence.